Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 173, and if you're paying attention, you might notice that my episode numbers are out of order. I ended up doing the basis for this episode 2 months ago, and then Tim Humphrey asked me if I wanted to co-host an episode with him, so I had to kind of put this one on hold, but I had already started planning it, so that's why the episode numbers are out of order here. If you haven't checked out the Huge Tunes review that I did with Tim Humphrey, go and check that out. That was my most recent episode that I published, where we reviewed Huge Tunes, the classic house and progressive house. And we basically came up with, I think, a top 10 from that catalog. So I thought that was a really fun session with Tim. And Tim, thank you so much for that. For today, for this session, I'm going to be reviewing a pretty famous modern label amongst underground heads, and that is Aniara. That's how I pronounce it, at least. I could be wrong. Aniara is a Swedish label that was founded all the way back in 2010 by a guy named Fabio. This is his last name, Fabio Kunz, or something very, very similar to that. He's a Swedish producer and label curator, as you can see here with Aniara. Aniara is still active up until 2026, although I haven't seen much from them this year now that I'm thinking about it. But a very interesting label. I would say Aniara, if I had to describe it, is mostly house and tech house for the most part, with exceptions. You'll find some techno in their catalog. But I think the main thing that makes Aniara distinctive is that it's a very modern and digital and kind of like tight clinical sound. The opposite of Aniara to me would be like old drum machine driven analog house, where things aren't as perfectly quantized and it's kind of like loose and a little bit wispier and a little bit more raw. When I think of Aniara across pretty much all of their productions, it's very obvious that it's made synthetically, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the synthetic nature of it is kind of the draw, because you have people making house and tech house, but they're using super modern sound banks and super modern, like very forward thinking ingredients that translate very well into late night club environments. So when I think if you think of Aniara, maybe some of the first producer that comes to mind for me is Dorisburg. And where do you play a Dorisburg record, right? Not during the day, man. Dorisburg is like if you think of the producer and DJ that's locally famous in New York and maybe famous in other places in the country, Naveen G. Naveen G was famous at least about 10 years ago when he was DJing a lot. I think he still DJs now, but when he was DJing a lot, he was famous for putting together these really nice, tight, dark sets. And a lot of times he would open for John Digweed and play like no faster than 125 and just give you this like weird tripped out sound like Dorisburg. And that's kind of what Aniara is to me, is like very specific to 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I guess midnight, but it has an overall dark aesthetic to it, modern sounds, and some of the best forward-thinking producers that you'll find in modern times. So I think that's a pretty good summary. I picked out 6 records from the Aniara catalog that are my favorite standouts. It was actually pretty tough to curate this down because there are a lot of gems spread out across their catalog. And when I was preparing for the episode, I remember Aniara all the way almost back to the beginning. I think I started following them in 2012 or 2013. There have been patches of the catalog where I was into them for 1 or 2 or 3 releases, and then they would hit kind of a weird spot that didn't really align with my tastes, and I'd kind of back off for 4, 5, 6, 7 releases, and then maybe like 3 years later, 4 years later, it's like, oh, here's a new one on Aniara, and this one kind of hits the spot. So my experience with Aniara has been weaving in and out of their catalog. It's not like I've been buying them the entire way. There were just some places where they weren't really matching up with my interests, but overall, I would say really a high level modern label, and something to really be respected. So Fabio, thank you for all the effort that you've put into curating this music so far. My first pick out of 6 is by the Aniara famous Mattias Mansouri. It's this one here, and this is the backside. So you can get a sense looking at this, just if you look at this pattern alone, right? What is this record probably going to sound like, right? It looks like Native American, Native South American, trippy, like prehistoric shit, right? And that's actually very reflective of what you're getting here. This is Mattias's kind of attempt at vortex techno. And I could take an aside here and just talk about where I'm at with vortex techno, because maybe some of you would agree with me, maybe some of you will disagree. But labels like Hypnus and artists like Luigi Tozzi started releasing vortex techno in 2014, 2015, and it was a derivative of what Mike Parker and Donato Dazzi had done in the early 2000s. They were basically the first people that made that weird didgeridoo, tripped out techno sound, and for years it sat under the surface. I mean, if you look at records like Donato Dazzi's Metal Slave that came out in 2005, nobody really cared about that in the beginning. It was just like, who's Donato Dazzi? That's a weird name. That's a weird guy. I don't know anything about him. But they had basically pioneered without intending to be anything. They just pioneered and accidentally stumbled into a sound that sounded really badass on a club system when you were a little bit less than sober. So then Hypnus started trying to resurrect that sound, and it's funny that somebody whose last name was Tozzi came and resurrected the Dazzi sound. And I recognize that Luigi Tozzi is a very talented producer, and there are mixes that you can find online. There's that, I can't think of the name of the series. The Memoir series. You can go and listen to Vortex Techno. There's probably enough of it out there that you could listen to these mixes for the rest of your life and not finish them all. People are just taking these 5, 6, 7 minute tracks and segmenting them together into this like super homogenized vortex sound that I'll admit, like it goes really well with a long drive in the car. But at the same time, there's something about the music that makes me not want to like buy the records, bring them home, and try to play them myself. It's almost like the context either has to be like in the car, or maybe I'm out like at a club with a really, really high-end system and somebody's playing that type of vibe to me. I think I would appreciate it in that context, but to like sit there and accumulate this modern vortex sound that's coming out, I just can't bring myself to do it. Like, I've completely abandoned Hypnus. I'm currently trying to sell my Hypnus records off, and being here in the U.S., I had them listed at like $12 for 3 months, and nobody took them in near mint condition. So now I've got the price cut. I'm just like trying to get them out the door. I'm like, I can't believe nobody wants these things, but maybe people came to the same conclusion that I did, which is like, I don't know that these things really have lasting power. So, anyways, that's my general take on modern vortex techno. I think it's been beat to death, unfortunately. But that being said, bringing it back to this record, this is far enough away from the traditional vortex sound here with the title track, Cha Hey Shalom, which means, I translated it, it was like hi, hello, peace, which kind of jives with the sound of the girl's voice who's saying it. It's a very meditative record, but the sound banks and the style of this, that I would still say, that's a vortex techno record, and it has that trippy vibe, but there's something about it that's not cliche. It's very standout, it's very unique, and I would say top shelf. So I would give this a solid 5 out of 5. And the other tracks on this release are in a similar vein. So check out Mattias El Mansouri, Shah Shalom. And if you guys have been following my channel for a long time, you know that I love Minilog. I talk about them a lot. I really wish they would get back together because I still think that they were better as a duo than they are separate. You have Marcus Henriksen, who's doing solo efforts, although I haven't seen anything from him recently. And then you have Sebastian Muellert, who is still releasing pretty often, but like Sebastian's catalog at this point has to be 4 or 5x of what Marcus is. So maybe that kind of shows like the discrepancy in how interested they both became in music over time. Maybe Sebastian was still like gung-ho on it, and Marcus was like, hey, I want to find something else to do with my life, or maybe he just got tired of making like the Minilog sound, and he just didn't want to do it as much anymore. I guess that would make sense. So I thought it was kind of weird to see Aniara featuring the Sebastian Muellert alias, which here is Wawuwe. Wawuwe has, man, probably, there's at least 10 Wawuwe records. There's like original releases. They've appeared on Kimochi. They've done original releases on the Wawuwe label. I think there's 5 of them in that series. And there's also a lot of remixes, and it's always Sebastian when he's by himself, and it's him making like a more tripped out sound, even more trippy than a Minilog record, which is pretty interesting to think about. But I would say that's a pretty accurate description. The track that I'm featuring here is called What's Left, and What's Left is driven primarily by a meditative vocal that was obviously lifted from some kind of guided meditation session where there's a female voice that's talking to you and basically stripping down your ego, taking away like the components of your identity one by one, and saying like if it's not your gender, if it's not your age, if it's not your race, if it's not your name, you know, I'm kind of paraphrasing there, then what's left? And right, and you're just kind of left with this like crazy open-ended question. And if you should so happen to stumble into this, again, maybe, I don't know, like hypothetically, if somebody took an edible and they're pretty far in and they took this, I think they could actually have a pretty good experience with it. So this, I think, most people would agree is probably in the top 5 that's ever been released on the Aniara label. I like that they went and recruited Sebastian, who, as far as I know, only appeared on the label once, came and dropped this doozy, and then just pieced out. So highly recommend it. If you're going to spend a ton of money on anything out of this entire episode, this is the one to get here. This is Wawuwe and What's Left.
Alone where you are, and face what you are most afraid of facing: the annihilation of you, without any hope of survival. The end of your life as you know it. The end of you as you think yourself. The end of all that you have accumulated, or gained, or lost. The end of it, period. Then this lion courage
I mentioned my affinity for Dorisburg, and I'm definitely going to give Dorisburg a shout here. This was one of the earliest, or is one of the earliest Aniaras that I still own. I had earlier ones that I sold off. I was like, there's, sometimes a record just doesn't have the lasting power, and it's like I'd rather cash out and let somebody else enjoy this and go on and buy something else. So I did have records older than this one from the Aniara catalog, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think this one here is probably the oldest that I have. 2011. This was, I think, my very first exposure to Dorisburg, and I remember listening to this for the first time because you can go and look on Discogs. I wrote a review for it. This was, I think, the same year that it came out. I was listening to it, and I glommed onto the track called Transform. And I think it does a great job of kind of showcasing what Dorisburg was and what he still is as a producer, which is he has a great talent for taking weird melodic, not pads, but not blatant melodies either. Like he's somewhere in the middle. Like whatever the difference is between like a normal synth line and a pad, it's kind of like these like medium-sized melodic concepts that he injects into his track. They're almost always dark and kind of minor key and haunted, and it plays right into that late night Aniara vibe that I was telling you about. And this one here just has a simple little like three or four note like melodic concept in it that it just drives the track. It makes it sound really unique, and it makes me think that it like one of those tracks where, okay, I can listen to it in my little room here and I know it's going to sound like X, but if you were to extrapolate this track out and let that melody expand inside of a big room with heavy bass hitting and then that creepy melody just coming into your ears right at the right volume, I think it could really do some serious damage on the dance floor. So check this out. This is Dorisburg making his really like early debut years with the track called Transform. Pick number 4 comes from an artist named Arcayo. I almost pronounced it Arcajo, but then I would have just sounded like a belligerent American. So I looked it up. How do I pronounce the electronic producer's name? Arcayo, and it's a Swedish name. And interestingly, Arcayo is his first name is Nils. I can't remember his last name, but he's half of Genius of Time. And it's funny because I guess he had a segregated sound, right? If you think of what Arcayo records are, they're heavy techno. I mean, they're techno fundamentally, right? But they're kind of like that modern break-ish type of techno. Not a real break beat, but kind of breaky where the beat kind of has like a stop and a start to it, as opposed to just like a relentless pounding thumping that you can get from a lot of techno. I guess that I would consider to be boring techno. That's the reason that I was listening to Danny Teneglia's Balance CD, and it's pretty techno influenced, and especially when you get to the second disc. I mean, I love Teneglia, but some of the tracks, like I know that they're like good techno tracks, but I just don't like straight up techno that much. Like I never have. I can't get into it. I think it doesn't have enough groove or enough offbeat, or it just like to, if I could make the mistake of buying a techno record and it's just like a big booming kick drum, I can't deal with it, man. It's got to have some kind of sophistication to the rhythm or something that gives it like a little bit more like up and down or like a chug to it or something. Uh, I, I don't understand how that became the popular sound and why people like it so much. I mean, it if I'm out at a club and I haven't had any drinks at all and somebody's playing really heavy techno like that, it's just like I'm just like I don't even have a watch, but I'd be looking at it like I'm looking at my phone like is it time to leave yet? Like I just cannot get down with that sound. And I look forward to a future where techno falls by the wayside. Like, can we please just get off of techno and find something else interesting to do? So on that note, RKO, here, this is an interesting techno track. The track I'm talking about here is called Cave Jam. And Cave Jam is, I think, well loved by Aniara fans. Some people online were saying that it's their favorite track on this various artists release. There's also a really nice one that I almost picked on here by however you pronounce that artist's name, where I have my finger, Evade. That one's really good too. Cave Jam I chose. Yeah, it's a big booming kind of like techno track, but it really has a uniqueness to it. It's not like in your face, bang you, bop you over the head techno. It's got a level of sophistication in it with tribal drums, and I feel like the bass gets low enough that it could really like dig into a system, but at the same time, kind of contrasted with that, the drums have like an airy reverb on them, almost like maybe you're Damian Lazarus and you're towards the end of your set and you're playing out in the middle of a desert somewhere wearing a bathrobe. I think those drums would go off in like a large outdoor type environment. So, you know, I guess it's called Cave Jam, but to me those drums are spacey, not cavey, and the drums really make the track. So yeah, really interesting to see RKO forked off as Genius of Time doing just house, and then with his partner, and then when he wants to make new, modern, sophisticated, interesting techno, he comes over and does his RKO alias and drops tracks like Cave Jam. So monster pick here. I hope you guys like the sample. Pick number 5, I think, came out in 2025, maybe early 2026. This is Dana Bergquist, and I think the release is called Earth Creatures. You can see it's got this little kind of like tadpole-looking creature here. I was intrigued by this art on the label, and that's what got me to sample it, because I don't really have any other Dana Bergquist records that I know of. And I think the whole release is really interesting music. I guess modern tech house. I don't even know what category to put this in. Modern club music? No, I think the thing that it's most equivalent to, I guess, would be tech house, but it's just so creative. The track Drex Vibe, I chose initially because it kind of has this like downward spiraling sound to it. It reminded me of Jeremy Caulfield's record called Gravitas, where it has a pitch down that makes you feel like you're like getting like spun down into the ground. And I almost chose it for that because it was such a clever track design. But I couldn't help but fall for Apollo 11 because I'm really into like space and UFOs and all that kind of. I'll get to the UFO stuff later. Um, Anything to do with breaking out of the solar system, I'm down with. And Apollo 11 features a really cool set of space chatter that I'm assuming was recorded and placed into the track from Apollo 11. And one of the other discerning factors or deciding factors that really got me liking Apollo 11 is the one-note piano stab that appears every few beats in the track. There's something just ominous and dark and simple about that. Where I have another track. I'll give you a picture of it that has a similar concept in it. It's by that minimal artist named like Raldive or Raldiv. I don't know how to say that dude's production name, but he has a track called The Tunnel that came out. I'll give you a picture of the label here, and that has a very similar, just like one note piano jab. It sounds like it's played on like the left end of a piano that you would touch in somebody's house, right? Like it's not refined or synthesized. It's just a piano stab, but it's so sick and it sets the track off, and you get the same feeling here in Apollo 11. So combining that with the space chatter and the creeped out vibe, I think it's just a nasty record all around. And my sixth and final pick for you is from the very distinguished Aniara White Label series. I have to make sure I don't accidentally tip this record out of its case and scratch the hell out of it. Yeah, this is from the Aniara White Label series. I have almost all these. I think I'm only missing one of them. I can't remember which number it is, but this is what the Aniara White Labels look like. They don't tell you the track name on here. I guess they tell you that in some other place, but it's known on Discogs. White Label series, I think, started in 2023, and the last release on it was in 2025, and this is it. And I really wanted to give Dorisburg another shout because I have a lot of Dorisburg records. I almost accidentally turned this into a Dorisburg episode because I found so many Dorisburg records in the Aniara catalog that I liked, but I didn't want to just sit there and harp on the guy just for this entire episode. So my choice here is Dorisburg and Ephraim. That's how you pronounce that. Ephraim Kent, and it's their track called X-Files Groove. I was mentioning earlier that I'm down with space, I'm down with UFOs. You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, when I went to school in the public library, if you went to the section that had stuff about UFOs and Bigfoot, you might get like 3 books, and it was very limited back then. The source material that you could get, and it was completely relegated to fiction, right? Like, yeah, aliens are out there probably, but all the stories are like these like crackpot stories, and just especially when you start having UFOs in the same book as Bigfoot. Like, Bigfoot is way less credible. Like, Bigfoot has almost no chance of being true, whereas as we're moving into modern times now, the more and more people that you have telling these stories and recording anomalous things with cameras and cell phones, and you have pilots seeing, you have military pilots seeing them, you have people testifying in Congress about it. It's like this is gone from being like over on the weird shelf in the library when I was back in third grade to like the only thing that we're missing is one of these things just coming and hovering over a city and just like actually announcing its presence to us officially. Like that's the only piece that's missing at this point. And you know, when I look at where we're at with like what are these anomalies that people are seeing, I think there's a few different ways to break it down. I suspect that okay, you have some people that are just faking stuff. Like they zoom in on a bird or they zoom in on a balloon or an oddly shaped balloon and the wind blows it and it looks like an object that's doing something weird, right? So those are like fakes. Then I think that the likelihood that the military, the US military or other military related entities have craft is actually pretty damn high at this point. And the I think the likely scenario is that they've recovered something like a sensor or some kind of drone that came from outside of our solar system, was flying around here, crashed. And I do think reverse engineering programs are very highly likely. Like I'm not 100% sure, but I would say 80 to 90% likely that there are reverse engineering programs that are designed to actually take fallen technology and use it almost like as a gift or a springboard or a launch pad to figure out the next step in physics. And I don't know if any of you guys are Joe Rogan fans, but recently Eric Weinstein was on there. And I used to think 5 years ago, I used to think Eric Weinstein was a crackpot. And the more that I listened to him, I'm like, okay, yeah, he can be a little bit smug to listen to, but he makes one really good point. He points out that in modern physics, right, we haven't really made any progress on unifying the small level, I guess, quantum theory. I don't know if my terminology is right, with like macro gravity. And he thinks that the university system and mainstream physics, if you want to call it that, has been like purposely rerouted and derailed intentionally into string theory to waste everybody's time. Meanwhile, it's very possible, and I think this is also more likely than not to be true, that there are advances in physics and like equations that have been realized and understood that are not made mainstream. And the reason is because the first person to have the first entity in the world, which is now obviously very shaken up, that has these equations and can figure out how to apply them is going to like absolutely dominate, right? Like if you show up to the war with your best F-22 or F-35 or whatever the newest fighter is, right, and it's still pushing molecules out the back, and then you have something else that can move through space by altering it, as opposed to brute force of just ejecting gas molecules out the back, right? You're going to crush the competition. So I think that a lot of the UFOs that are being seen that are blowing people's mind and doing things that quote unquote defy physics, which is like a stupid thing to say because anything that you see happening is not defying physics. It just means that you don't understand physics. But I think that those things are I think they're going to. I think they're out there. I think they're real, and I think they're basically pilot test programs for these military entities that are trying to figure out how to harness it accurately and safely. That being said, I still also think that there is a subset of UFO sightings that are actually drones and pieces of technology that are coming and visiting here. I don't think that necessarily there are occupants in those vehicles, but I do think some of those are like recon missions, and every once in a while, probably, like I was saying, one of those things crashes or has a malfunction, and it doesn't make it back up to the mothership. So, anyways, that was a huge tangent, but that's where I think we're at with this. So, anyways, bringing it back to the record. back to the Ephraim and Dorisburg here. X-Files groove. Got to give a shout out to X-Files and Mulder. Huge influence on me growing up. I mean, where else could you get your sci-fi scary fix back in the day? So I had to give that a shout out. And X-Files groove here. Dorisburg bringing nothing but the haunted, creepy, melodic undertones and just making you feel unsettled. Okay, this concludes my Aniara episode. I hope you enjoyed these 6 picks. To the label curator at Aniara, thank you so much for putting all this music together. You have a huge fan base and a cult following. And to my fans out there that are listening to this episode, let me know which tracks you liked. Let me know if you agree with any of the side tangents that I took, talking about music and UFOs and whatever the heck else. That's all for today, and enjoy your weekend. Take care.